This is the start of a pretty ambitious series talking about all the authoritarian governments that have basically ever existed and grouping them into different categories. But with that just little bit of prologue, you could say, I'm gonna talk about the first time there's ever been such a thing as an authoritarian government that the people were dissatisfied with. Now, the most records it goes back to is Athens, specifically the 40 tyrants of Athens. This is pretty common. If you remember back from your sixth grade history class, then you probably memorized the order of. You probably memorized the order of governments that Greece had, or Athens specifically, has faced. This being first oligarchy, then the people were dissatisfied, and then they moved on to a progressive, very progressive at the time at least, democracy. Then they went to a tyranny, and then they went back to a democracy. So that pattern there is pretty interesting because you see the first government type is what the status quo of the time period was. Authoritarian, a very select, very rich group of men had control over the entire quote unquote country. I know it wasn't really like a country, but it's the closest thing that they had to the time period. Now, then you see the people being dissatisfied and saying, hey, what if we vote for our leader? And enough people agreed, and enough people decided to do that. And that is how Athens became the birthplace of democracy that we know today. However, then the oligarchs, who originally or previously had the power, they were dissatisfied with that. And they then took Athens back and made it an even worse state that it was previously in, known as the tyranny age, with 40 specific, extremely rich, extremely powerful people having control of the entire city. Now, thinking of that even today, that is such a far cry for what we consider even authoritarian governments today. Only 40 people have any sort of say in government. Now, even if you adjust that to the size of a city, or proportionate, whatever you want to measure it in, that 40 to one entire city ratio, you're never going to see that come out in any other authoritarian governments that ever existed. I know there have been sayings such as one man rules alone in North Korea, Kim Jong-un. That's not true. There are many people that influence him, such as generals and many other sorts of that. He has political advisors. The tyrants had no advisors. They just had each other. 40 of them for the entire city of Athens. And as you may imagine, that didn't work out so well. However, what I'm going to focus on is the psychology of these 40 tyrants. So, I believe at their core that all of these men, they know what they're doing is wrong. They know, ethically speaking, they are in the wrong. However, they do not have that much of moral guilt for it, because their justification is that it's in the good name of my family, or something along those lines. It's in the good name of myself. It's not in the good name of my country, or the good name of my city, state. This is because they use Athens as a device, unlike people like Stalin. Stalin used the USSR as not his way to get to power, although he did that. He also used it as his way to basically assert himself, not just give him money, but to become a global power. the Athenians' goal wasn't that. And the thing with Stalin, comparing it to these tyrants, because frankly that's the best example we have, Stalin still had a very strong patriotism and nationalist sense towards the USSR. He wanted the best to happen to the USSR people, which means that he would benefit from. Same way with the vast majority of countries around the world. Today, and even back then, they all want their country to succeed the most. Except for these 40 tyrants in Athens. They don't care what happens to Athens as long as it stays in power. They think, oh, a plague's happening? Good. It's going to get rid of my rivals while I can stay in my palace. While Stalin would say, oh, a plague's happening, what can we do to undermine it and try to make it seem like that it's not our fault? So this opens up the idea of the Greek school of thought, the original Greek school of thought. Now, I know people refer to Greece as the birthplace of democracy, but I'll mix it up. I'll make it so that we refer to Greece as, from now on, as the birthplace instead of democracy, instead of tyranny, which you could also say it is. It is the birthplace of the original idea of authoritarian governments dissatisfying the people. However, now we look abroad the Mediterranean and we see the previous Bronze Age civilizations that were very successful for an extremely long period of time. Egypt. What did the Egypts say that their leaders were? Well, they said, we need a pharaoh because a pharaoh is chosen by God. They believe that their rulers are chosen by God himself or themselves. I know there's multiple gods. I know it's polytheistic. I'm aware. However, it is important to know that Egypt had the mindset that the gods, plural or singular, depending on the religion, chose the pharaoh. You could apply the same logic to Kaiser Wilhelm. I know that's very down the line. I'll just give an example. Kaiser Wilhelm lived in the Netherlands after he lost World War I because he was exiled by the Allies. However, he believed all the way up until his death during World War II that the Germans were going to come running back to him and he was going to be embraced by the German people with open arms because he believes firmly that Germany needed a Kaiser and he believed that he was going to fill that role. And also, many people in his country thought that too. Many people thought that eventually, over time, the Germanic people will realize that they need a Kaiser. And because the Kaiser is chosen by God. Now, do I think that the Kaiser was doing it to get a power grab? Not exactly. I think that he was doing this because he believed with his religious beliefs that the God chose him to rule Germany and have a successful rule. So, I believe personally that the Kaiser wanted to get in power because he wanted to fulfill his destiny, not exactly to completely get in power. Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent there. However, we'll go back to the Bronze Age. So we have Egypt kind of resemble the first sense and the first idea of what we consider to be an authoritarian government that the people like and the people feel like they need because God chose them, or gods, like I mentioned previously. So now I'm going to make a new concept, a new school of thought that rivals the Greek school of thought. I'll call it the Egyptian school of thought because it was one of the original examples of gods choosing the leader and people going along with it. And this is another reason why that if your ruler is chosen by a different faith than the people, it usually doesn't end well. There's very rare examples of a ruler saying that ruling over the vast majority of their population being a different religion than them. I know the Mongols did it, I'm aware. However, I don't think it is. I think the Mongols were a very big exception to that case. So, with that out of the way, I think this is a good place to end it. I just hit the 10-minute mark, and I hope to see you for the next episode. Thank you.